Alright, this feedback is for Embey. Here are the questions asked from the original request. So, first question was, I want the red portal thing to have a bit of texture, but I'm not sure how. I tried a lot of different brushes and tedious bumps, and none of it looked right. So texture. Second question was, the glowing orb I'd like to look less like it's behind the red bits and a lot more like it's somewhere inside, but I'm struggling to give it depth. And then the third question was, how do you feel about the overall composition and camera angle? I want more of an uphill feel, but I'm not sure if I accomplished it. So I will answer them out of order. I will answer the composition first. So when it comes to composition, one common thing that I've been told is that the canvas being square makes it a lot harder to make a solid composition that has flow in it. I'm guessing it's because you would tend to put the central focus. Actually, let me make it a grid. Put the focus of the picture like anywhere in these spots, and no matter what, it would look quite rigid. And so something like a more rectangular canvas might just automatically help you have an easier time doing composition. And secondly, the composition that you have, even though it has a lot of curved lines, the overall directions of the stuff that you've drawn is like a bit parallel to the edges of the canvas, so it feels very, structured and hard to make it interesting. Combined with the square composition, doesn't really give you much room to place the objects in a way that helps the canvas flow well. So I would say like a bigger rectangular canvas, and then that allows you to do something like this, turn it a bit more to show the like ominous feel that you have going for the picture. The center parts of this thing here kind of draws the eye now from the top of the canvas down to the bottom of the canvas, and it's like framed by the sky in the back without it being too like rigid square rectangle within a rectangle kind of feel. So I think maybe something like this would help you choose other composition decisions better without me, say, telling you what to put in your drawing. And then secondly, with the camera angle, you wanted a more uphill feel, but not sure if you accomplished it. So when it comes to perspective, when you want people to see something from a certain angle, people draw those cues from the perspective that they see. And in, say, a city, let's say this is a apartment building, what would make the camera angle very clear is the third axis, right? So here's the first one, here's the second one, and the third one would be the depth. If you want people to think that they're looking at from like a camera angle from below, not only would these two these two lines be more like converging towards each other, because when you point up, then the vanishing point is above, so like up here somewhere, and so these two would kind of align together. But most importantly, the third one, the depth, would come down, right? Because if you're looking up, then the horizon is a lot lower, and if the horizon is low, then whatever this is assigned or aligned to would be downwards. And so this third line is what gives the a very clear a very clear... Sorry, I'm getting distracted. Let me mute this first. Gives a very clear idea, indication as to which angle the camera is from. And what is lacking in your structure is that you don't have a way to show this third depth. And because of the organic shape that you have going, therefore making it seem like it's not possible or it's hard to make this not look like a cardboard cutout. But the reality is there are tons of ways to do that. And this leads me to your second question, which is you want the glowing orb to be less like it's behind the red stuff. So less like, let's see. So this is your setup. This is your red thing. Less like the orb is here. And more like this is the red structure. And the orb is in the middle, right? That's what you want. And this is actually the key to helping you show that, or like a great opportunity, something that you can use to show your depth and angle of camera angle. And that is because in order to show that this thing is between the two arms, even if they don't have to be like this thick, they still have some sort of depth to it, right? So the thing that I was talking about earlier, vertical, horizontal, and then this depth line, right? So to depict this here means adding something like this on the back side. Because having depth means that not only is the front side visible, but the back side as well. Let me find a good color for it. I'm gonna assume that like it's gonna reflect the glow of the orb a bit. So this would be the front part of the arm, and then this would be a bit of the back part of the arm. Again, here as well, although since it's coming from, if the vision looks like it's coming from the right side bottom, it means that less of the back side of the right arm will be shown. And by drawing this back side, not only do you give the viewer the visual cue of this depth that shows them this is the perspective grid, and therefore we are looking at it from bottom up. Not only does it do that, but it also allows for overlap. Overlap is the most important thing in showing depth. It's the most effective, efficient thing in showing depth. One thing in front of another, then it's clear. It's clear that one thing is in front of the other. And drawing this backside allows you to put the orb in front of the other side of the red structure, which makes it clear that the order is front, middle, back. And so this is a good solution for the problem that you're having with struggling to give it depth. Usually there are other ways to give something depth, including changing colors, changing values, fog texture, contrast and stuff. But those come later because those can only help if there's no visual, like there's no optical illusion going on. Because if the image itself is not clear. Like, let's say without these webbing in front, if it was just this, you wouldn't even be able to ascertain that what if this orb is way in front of the arm. And so any sort of coloring that I have done here, for instance, would not help very much. There's no overlap visual cue to show you which of the order, what order is this orb. Is this one? Is this front, middle, back? Or is it front, middle, back? Or is it front, middle, back? And that is purely because of no overlap. So overlap should be like one of the first things that you consider when it comes to depicting depth, and I would suggest something like this here. And then lastly, the texture. Another thing that I have noticed here is that it seems like you want this to be distant. So it's far away, it's huge, and daunting. And since it's distant, the texture that you see on it would not be the fine texture of the material that makes up this structure, but rather the facets, like the sides of a mountain where cliffs have like lines going through it, but you don't really see like the texture of the rock. You just see the cracks that form over time, or the parts that get chipped off over time. And so that kind of texture, I think, would be most fitting for this structure. I don't know if I can handle demonstrating texture live because it takes too much time. I'm not good at drawing texture quickly, but like from what you can see, let's see. From what you can see me do right now, what I'm going for is just the larger facets. Like I'm using a big brush and I'm doing loose big brush strokes that show which parts of the structure has lighting on it and which parts don't. And then through the shape of these big brush strokes, I know it's super loose, and if you don't see what I'm saying, it's totally not you. It's just the limitation of what I can do like this. But what I'm choosing to focus on is the big shapes, big lines, blocks, rather than say sand grains or rock bits and stuff like that. And once this can be conveyed, I like to use hard brushes to draw this kind of surfaces, because texture usually has like sharp edges, at least in contrast to softer edges. And so using a hard brush allows me to create these kind of facets without trying to define what the facets shapes are too much. And then once you've decided the larger pieces, then I would draw like smaller pieces like these bumps. Notice how I'm not trying to draw them everywhere. This is a really common mindset, especially when you're rendering, because you're thinking about trying to polish everything or polish the entire picture. Sometimes it's good to like draw texture this zoomed out so that you can tell which parts might need texture and which parts don't. If you zoom in like this and try to draw texture properly so that it looks nice and rocky at this zoom, chances are when you zoom out, it will not look rocky, first of all, and then secondly, it would also make the object look a lot smaller than it should be, or look a lot closer than it should be, just because of perception. And so I added like tiny bumps that you mentioned, having tried here. I'm not concerned with making them detailed and rocky by themselves. If I zoom in, it looks terrible, but that's not the issue. The issue is giving texture a sense of what this is made of in, overall, right? So I draw them some places where I feel like it could use some details. I think it would help if you don't know where to put these, that you make a new layer. You do this, blah, 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 and then if you think it's too much, erase some parts of it until you feel like, okay, this is a good amount. Or if you straight up don't like it, just delete the layer. You wouldn't have to worry about having slowly painted this piece into oblivion. So a little bit of smaller shapes of texture on the surface, and then like if you really want to add a sense of scale to it, the finest texture, finest as in the smallest, sharpest texture, should be saved for very select places. So you don't want to put it everywhere. In here, let's say hypothetically, I use this orb to as an excuse to say, okay, I'm going to draw some reflections on the edge of the structure here. Maybe the structure is made of some sort of hard enough surface that it would reflect light like this, but I would put it in places that are closest to the orb so that the lights would reflect the strongest, and I would have these be very like restricted to this area and not drawn everywhere. And then same thing in the back, I would do something similar but with a darker value so that it's clear that this is the back, and therefore the distance put between them makes the light a little less bright. And then some more of this kind of lighter value at the ridges of these craters, maybe. And I'm just trying to find things to do. I'm not really sure what the texture of this object would be. But notice how I am using a small brush, a small hard round brush, or hard anything brush. And I put these not on every single crater, but only on some of them. And this step is important because it gives the thing scale. If it's close, then your eyes should be able to see this level of texture on everything because it's close to you. But if it's far away, the amount of texture that you see across the whole object might change, might differ. And having big texture like this, where all the texture shapes are quite large, allows you to show the shape of the object, and then having smaller tiny highlights saved for really important spots allows you to sort of extend the range, the spectrum of the broadest texture to the finest one to be a lot bigger. So before I started putting in these tiny texture, the texture range is like this much, right? Because the smallest texture is really close to the biggest one. But now that I've defined, oh, the other end of the spectrum is actually really far away. So this huge range of texture shapes gives you a sense that, okay, this thing has a big scale to it, and further enforces that, okay, maybe it's really far away such that we can see these this huge of a range of texture. So this is how I would approach drawing texture. This prevents you from making the object look flat, and uniform, and it prevents the texture from looking just like static over time. That tends to happen when you paint too much. So hopefully this can be like a little guide for you to decide how to paint this object the texture that you actually intended for it. Yeah, I don't think there's anything I'd like to say, so hope that helps.